We are starting a new chapter, and this chapter is chapter 12, all about geometry. Today we're going to be talking about some basic geometric figures. The better you learn these, the easier high school will be when you get to geometry class in high school. So really try to work hard to understand what I'm talking about today. So first of all, let's go over three of the most basic things in geometry. The first is a point. Now technically a point doesn't have any size, but we represent it by just a dot and then a letter. We call that a point. So if I want to name the point, all I do is use the letter that the point represents. If I have at least 2 points, I can make a line. So if I have A and B here, I draw a line through those 2 points. Notice there are arrows going in both directions. There are a lot of other points on this line. A line is actually an infinite number of points. I just labeled 2 of them. I can label any number of points on that line. It's an infinite number of points, and it keeps on going infinitely in both directions. When I label a line, I choose any 2 points on the line, and then above the line, I draw a line with 2 arrows. You must have those arrows. If it asks you to label a line, you must have at least 2 points, any 2 points that are on that line, and then above those 2 letters, you have a line with 2 arrows on both sides. If you do not have the arrows, it's going to be a segment, and it will be wrong if they're asking for a line. So you must have the arrows above. You must have 2 points that are on that line. If they ask you to draw a line, let's say they ask you to draw a line with point CB. Well, just put 2 points, label them CB, then draw a line through it, and make sure you have arrows on both sides to show that that line keeps on going on forever and ever. So a line really has, again, it has an infinite number of points. I could put a whole lot more points on here, but those are just 2 of the points, and I only need any 2 points to label that line. So if I only have 2 points, then I can only draw one line. If I have more than 2 points, let's say I have 3 different points. We call these non-collinear because they're not on the same line. Well, how many different lines could I draw? Well, if I have 3 different points, that means I could draw one line here between those 2. I could draw one line here between those 2. And then I can also connect these 2 with a line. So if I have just 2 points, 1 point, 2 point, there's only one thing I can do. I can only draw one line. If I have 3 points that are not on the same line, one of the points is on a different line, then I can actually draw 3 different lines with those 3 points. How about if I have 4 points? Well, let's say I have another point over here, and that's not on the same line as those. Well, obviously I can draw those 3, but I can also connect this one with this point, and this one with this point, and this one with this point. So now I end up having 6 different lines. And so on from there. So I have a point, I have a line, which is an infinite number of points, and I always use 2 arrows to represent that line. I have to have those arrows, otherwise it's not a line. If I have 3 points that are not in line, we say that defines a plane. What is a plane? Well, a plane is just a flat surface. Technically, we could use this whiteboard or this whole wall to show a plane. The floor would be a plane, the ceiling would be a plane. But in geometry, a plane actually keeps on going forever in every single direction, but it's a flat surface that keeps on going forever in all directions. I also have parts of a line. So remember, a line keeps on going forever in all directions. What if I just want one part of that line instead of forever in all directions? Well, if I want just one part of the line, we call that a segment. Notice I don't have any lines going on in all directions. So if I, for example, going back up here, if I just want the part of the line that goes from here to here, we call that a segment. Now that still includes an infinite number of points. It's all the points between A and B, but it only includes the points between those 2 letters. In order to show a segment, I do it just like a line, but I do not have arrows. So a segment does not have arrows because it doesn't keep going in either direction. It's just the points between A and B. For both lines and segments, the order doesn't matter because it's not going in a certain order. It's just the points between A and B, so I can write AB or BA. Third, we have array. So array begins, but then it keeps on going in one direction. A line keeps on going in both directions. Array begins at one point. So for example, I could begin at B and then keep on going forever in this direction. So it would include all the points to the left of B forever, but no points to the right of B. In that case, I still need 2 points. I want 1 point where it starts, and I'm going to put that one first, and then one other point in the direction that it's going. And when I label it, I have an arrow that's going, starting where I start with B, and then going in the opposite direction. So for lines and segments, the order doesn't matter, but for arrays, the order does matter. The first letter has to be the letter where it begins, and the arrow has to be pointing from that to the other letter. So this would be array AB because it starts at A and then it goes in the direction of B. It doesn't stop at B, it goes past B, and then it keeps on going in that direction. So I could not label this array BA because it starts at A. That would be wrong. This would be array BA. So remember, you always have to have the 2 points. In a line or a segment or a array, you always have to have at least 2 points and then label it correctly. So those are my major figures. So let's look up here. Here I have this figure with 3 points, point X, Y, and Z. So I have a point here, X, point here, Y, and a point here, Z. And this is example 1 in your book, and it says it wants me to label all the points, all the segments, lines, planes, rays. So first of all, the points, I have a point here, X, a point here, Y, and a point here, Z. So I just call that X, Y, and Z. You just use the letter for the point. Now, how about a line? Well, I have one line here. Remember, I use the 2 letters that are on that line, the 2 points, X and Y. And then I have to have arrows going in both directions. So remember, I could do YX or XY, but those are the same line. XY and YX are not different lines. They're the same line. I also have a line here. That's line XZ. Again, I could write that ZX or XZ, but that's just the same line. And then finally, I have YZ. Those are my 1, 2, 3 lines, or I could call that ZY. How about segments? Well, I have segment from here to here. So remember, with the segment, I do not put any arrows. It's just the points between those. The line continues in both directions, but the segment is just the points, including Y and Z and between Y and Z. I also have a segment here, YX. I have a segment here, XZ. Those are my segments. How about my rays? Well, I actually have more rays because the ray is different depending on where it starts. So the segment YZ is the same as segment ZY. So I don't have to write that twice because that's the exact same thing. But the ray YZ starts at Y and then keeps on going forever in the direction of Z. But the ray ZY starts at Z, goes through Y, and then keeps on going on in the same direction. I mean, the opposite direction. So those are 2 different rays. So I have to write both of those rays because they are different. YZ starts here and goes in that direction. ZY starts here and goes in that direction. I also have ray YX. And a different ray is ray XY. YX starts here and goes in this direction. Ray XY starts here and goes in this direction. I have ray XZ and then ray ZX. Those are my rays. I only have 1 plane since this is all on the same flat surface. I need at least 3 points for a plane, so I use all 3 points, X, Y, and Z, and I would just write plane X, Y, Z. That's all you have to do for a plane. All right, finally, we're going to finish off talking about angles. So what is an angle? Well, an angle is simply 2 rays with a common endpoint. So the endpoint that both of these rays have is, we call that the vertex. So the endpoint for both rays is called the vertex, and then the sides of this angle are rays. So I would say this is ray AB, that's the first side. this is ray AC, and then the point is the vertex, so the vertex would be A. So this would be, the sides are AB, the first ray, and AC, so I have to diagram this rays. Remember, ray have to start with the letter where it starts, and then I have to have just one arrow going in the direction that it is going. I can label angles in three different ways. I can label them just by their vertex. So I use the angle sign and then the name of their vertex, which is A. Or I can use all three letters. So I can use BAC, or I can go the opposite way, CAB. But this is very important. The vertex has to be in the middle. When you use all three letters, the vertex must be in the middle. So I can either start here and do BAC or start here and do CAB, but I could not do ABC. That would be wrong because B is not the vertex. So the vertex has to be in the middle when I label them. Three ways to label an angle with just the vertex, or starting at either side with the vertex in the middle. So you have to use either one letter for an angle or all three with the vertex in the middle. Now, in your books it talks about using a protractor. Since it's a little more difficult for me to show that for you in a video, I'm actually going to attach on this lesson a YouTube video from a different source to show you how to use a protractor. Make sure you have your protractors. You must use protractors for this lesson. But when I'm measuring an angle, I measure it in what we call degrees. All degrees are is when I take a circle and I divide it into 360 different sections. Each section is a degree. So there are 4 different types of angles. If an angle is between 0 and 90 degrees, we call that acute. It's going to be smaller than 90 but greater than 0. So this is 90 degrees. It looks like an L. Anything that's smaller than that is going to be acute. That's going to be between 0 and 90. If it's exactly 90 degrees, it's going to be right, and normally they're going to have a little square to show that it's exactly 90. If it's more than 90, it's going to be obtuse. That's going to be between 90 and 180, and it's going to look like this. So this is what a right angle looks like, an L. If it's smaller than that, it's going to be acute. If it's bigger than that, it's going to be obtuse. Finally, a straight line is actually an angle, and we call that line just a straight angle, and that's exactly 180 degrees. So 180 degrees is just a line, and we call that a straight angle. Now, sometimes they will give you 2 angles that are next to each other. We'll talk more about this later. But if they give you 2 angles that are next to each other and they give you the big angle, X, Y, Z, that's the big angle, I know by looking at the 3 letters. That's 57. This small angle, W, Y, Z, is 23, and I want this angle right here, X, Y, W. Well, I know the whole thing is 57. I know this small one is 23, so to find the other small one, I know these 2 add up to that, so I just have to subtract. 57 minus 23 is going to be 34 degrees. So I just subtract, and that gives me my smallest angle, and that helps me figure that out. Let me just make sure you understand correctly how to do a couple of these problems. So for numbers 1 through 4, make sure you label them correctly. So for number 1, for the points, all you have to do is write the letter of each point. That's all you have to do. You should have 3 answers. For number 2, for the lines, remember they have to have arrows on both sides. If you don't have the arrows, it's going to be wrong. And you have to have 2 letters. So you should have 3 answers for number 2 as well. For number 3, there's only 1 plane. Remember, you have to use all 3 letters, so just write plane with the 3 letters. For number 4, remember for the segments, you have to have 2 letters, and then you have to have a line above without any arrows. If you put an arrow, it will be wrong. The order doesn't matter. So DF is the same as FD. You don't have to write that twice. And then the rays, you have to have 2 letters with a line above and an arrow going in one direction. And the order does matter, so you actually have 6 different answers for number 5. For number 6, 7, and 8, make sure you draw them correctly. So you're drawing a segment for 6. So it should look something like this with your letters. For number 7, you're drawing a line. So you should have 2 points, and then you should also have arrows going in both directions. And then for the ray, make sure you start off with the first point, and then the arrows going through the second point, and then continuing on in that direction. All right, for numbers 14 and 16, make sure you have two answers. You have both the angle. You're going to use a protractor to find the angle, and label it as either acute, right, obtuse, or straight. For numbers 18 and 20, you're going to draw. It doesn't matter what the degrees are, but you have to draw the correct angles, acute, right, straight, and obtuse. And after you draw them, make sure you use a ruler to draw them so they're nice and straight. After you draw them, you have to measure them with your protractor and give the angle measurements. Right. Hopefully you do well on that lesson.